Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. Night in Asgard was bright enough to read by. The halls held a gentle glow the way a hearth holds quiet, and even the stars seemed to lean closer when Baldr walked the terraces above the city. Light followed him without being asked. It gathered in his hair, it softened the edges of stone, and it made the shadows forget their names. But on this night, Light learned a new word: fear. Baldr dreamed. He dreamed of a shore made of ash. The sea did not move. It only remembered movement. Across the still water a cold wind braided itself with silence. And in that silence he heard everything that had ever been said at the last moment. Goodbyes that had never found a mouth, prayers that had never found a god, promises that had never found their way back home. In the middle of that shore stood a tree that had never known leaves. Its trunk was pale and smooth, its branches the color of moonlight without warmth. From one of those branches hung a small shape that might have been a bird, or a fruit, or a bell. When the wind touched it, it did not sing. It did not fall. It only waited. Baldr stepped forward and the ash cracked beneath his heels like thin ice. He reached toward the branch. The shape swayed once. A whisper moved through the air, so soft it felt like the world was trying not to wake anyone. You will teach the gods what silence weighs. Baldr pulled his hand back. Who speaks? The end that begins. The tree shivered. The small shape trembled, no larger than a seed, no heavier than a word not yet spoken. He could not look away. Within it he saw a ring of light, and within that ring, a shadow shaped like his own face, dimming. He woke. The hall was quiet. The torches along the far wall burned without smoke, and the stone beneath him remembered the warmth of the day. Frigg, his mother, slept in the chamber beyond. Odin's steps could be heard faintly somewhere on the high paths where wind spoke in runes. The world was safe. It had always been safe where Baldr stood. He rose and walked to the window. Below, the courtyards rested beneath soft lanterns. A guard leaned upon his spear as if listening to a story he would never be able to repeat. Baldr pressed his palm to the cold glass and waited for the dream to lose its teeth. It did not. Hodr found him there, Hodr who knew darkness like a surname, whose hands never reached without learning the air first. He moved soundlessly to Baldr's side and stood with him, the way night stands beside a candle to make it visible. "You did not sleep," Hodr said. "I was sleeping when I learned I was awake," Baldr answered, a smile trying to be born and failing. "A dream came. I think it is not finished." "Tell me." Baldr told him about the shore that was not a shore, about the tree that had never known leaves, about the small shape that was waiting to become a word. He did not say the part where the shadow had worn his face. He did not need to. Hodr heard it in the way Baldr swallowed between sentences. Hodr's hand found his brother's shoulder. "Dreams are bridges. We decide what crosses." Baldr nodded, grateful for a wisdom that did not ask to be wise. Walk with me. They moved through the sleeping city. Doors knew their names and opened as they passed. A cat watched them from a stair and did not run. At the edge of the high court, they paused before the great ash that shadowed the square. No cousin to Yggdrasil, yet old enough to remember when laughter was new. Baldr touched its bark. The tree replied with a slow, patient sigh. Mother will worry if she hears I dreamed of endings, he said. She will make promises for me. She will ask the world to make them, Hodr corrected gently. Baldr could almost see it now. Frigg walking the realms, whispering to fire, to iron, to stone, to tooth and claw and storm, asking them to spare the one who had always spared them. She would gather oaths into a crown and place it upon her son's head and say, "Now nothing can touch you, my light." But there is a difference between what cannot be touched and what cannot be lost. At dawn, Baldr went to the lake beyond the walls, where the water kept a mirror the gods sometimes avoided. He knelt upon the pier and looked down. The face that looked back was as it had always been. Kind, a little tired from too much joy, made simple by the effort to remain gentle in a world that preferred to be impressed. And yet, there, behind the eye, something like a candle learning how to go out. He cupped water in his hands, but did not drink. If there is a price, let me pay it while there is still morning, he whispered. The ripples carried the words outward until they were only circles of light, and then nothing. Frigg found him long after the sun had climbed. She did not scold. She did not cry. She sat beside him and folded his hand into hers, and the world pretended to be small enough to hold them both. "You dreamed," she said. "I did. Tell me." He told her. Not about fear, not about endings, but about the feeling in the dream. The way certainty had suddenly gained weight. The way silence had entered the room and everyone had stood to let it pass. The way even light had listened. When he finished, they were both quiet, listening to the distant speech of geese on the lake. Frigg spoke at last. "There will be vows," she said. "I will ask everything that moves and everything that does not to swear that it will not harm you. I will ask stone and sickness, frost and iron, branch and beast. I will ask the sky. I will ask the sea. Ask also the small things," Baldr said, remembering the seed shape upon the branch. "They are the ones that wait." She smiled, and in her smile was the knowledge of a mother who had counted every danger by hand. "I will ask the small things twice." He laughed then, softly, and for a moment the world forgave itself for being fragile. That night the gods gathered. They believed in joy like a fortress. "If all have sworn," said Thor, "let us test what fear dares not approach." They made a game of it, as gods do when they wish to teach fear how to laugh. Stones bounced off Baldr like rain off a warm roof. Spears turned in the air and landed in the grass exhausted. Fire touched his sleeve and forgot to be fire. The hall rang with relief disguised as celebration. Only one did not laugh. Loki stood apart with a face like a mirror that had learned too much from its owner. He watched the way the gods relieved themselves into cheer. He watched the way Frigg's hands trembled once and then were steady. He watched the way Baldr, grateful not to frighten anyone, pretended the whole thing pleased him. Loki listened to the echo beneath the noise. When the hall was nearly empty, he left by a side door and followed a narrow path out toward the fields. A child's plant grew by the fence there, soft, pale, almost nothing. It did not look like a weapon. It looked like a question. In his sleep that night, Baldr returned to the ashen shore. The tree was waiting. The small shape trembled in a way that made him think of a voice clearing its throat before it says a name it has been avoiding. "What are you?" he asked it. It did not answer. It simply existed the way endings exist. Politely, without hurry, certain that arrival is a courtesy extended to those who believe themselves immune. He woke before it fell. The dawn was gray. The city was slow to breathe. Somewhere far away, Frigg was already counting. Somewhere nearer, a certain silence was already choosing its place in the room. Baldr rose. He dressed simply. He tied his hair back as if preparing for rain. He walked out into the court where the game would begin again, where gods would prove to themselves what they needed proven, that the world loved them as much as they loved it. As he stepped under the first light, the day made a small sound, like a cup being put down gently after a long, careful drink. There are promises that sound like songs, and promises that sound like prayers. But the ones a mother makes, they sound like breathing. Frigg walked through the worlds with the dawn behind her. The hem of her robe brushed dew from the grass, and wherever she stepped, the wind turned gentle. She carried no crown and no staff, only the memory of her son's dream, still echoing like a bell at the edge of her thoughts. Every realm she visited greeted her in silence first. Even gods hold their breath when love passes through them. She began with the greatest. The fire that lives in the heart of Muspelheim bowed its flame. "I swear," said the fire, "never to burn Baldr." Frigg nodded and thanked it, her eyes soft but unrelenting, the way light persuades darkness to open. Then she came to the stones that made the bones of the world. "I swear," said the stone, "never to strike him." The mountain echoed the promise, and the echo made it true. She spoke to frost, and frost melted to answer. She spoke to iron, and the metal remembered gentleness for the first time. She spoke to beasts, to fong and claw and hunger, and they bowed, ashamed of their sharpness. Every oath was a thread. Every word she gathered became part of a woven sky. A mother's tapestry stretched across fate itself. In Midgard, she walked among mortals who did not know her name but felt her passing like warmth on a cold morning. "Swear," she whispered to the sea. "I swear," the waves replied, though they had never spoken before. "Swear," she whispered to sickness. "I swear," it rasped, folding itself smaller until it became a shadow beneath her feet. The trees bowed. The air stilled. The very sun dimmed, out of respect for the work being done. And in every promise, Frigg heard the same undertone. A question she refused to answer. What if light was never meant to last? She ignored it. Mothers must. When she returned to Asgard, her arms were full of words, invisible garlands of protection. She laid them upon Baldr's shoulders like the morning lays itself across the world. No harm shall come to you, she said. Every living and unliving thing has sworn it. Baldr smiled, though he did not feel lighter. Then perhaps I may finally sleep without dreaming. In the corner Odin listened. He said nothing. His ravens tilted their heads as though hearing something between the silences. The All-Father knew what vows did to fate, how each one bent it slightly, how each word of protection drew the line of destiny tighter. That evening the gods gathered again, not out of fear, but out of celebration. They threw spears, stones, and laughter. They shouted challenges and dared the world to break its word. Nothing touched Baldr. Every strike turned to blessing before it reached him. The Aesir were giddy with safety. Even Thor, who had broken mountains for sport, laughed until tears burned his cheeks. See, said Frigg, radiant with relief. The world itself has sworn to love my son. But there are always small things. Out beyond the walls of Asgard, in a glade too quiet for gods to notice, something pale grew from the bark of an old oak. A little plant with a stem like green silk and berries like glass beads. It was young, too young to have been seen when Frigg made her rounds. The wind brushed its leaves and it swayed, not out of disobedience, but out of innocence. No one had asked it to swear. No one had taught it silence. Loki, walking unseen through that same glade, paused. The air was thick with laughter carried from the city. He crouched beside the small plant and touched it gently, almost tenderly. "What are you called?" he asked. The plant said nothing. "Quiet." "Then," Loki whispered, "perhaps you and I will have something in common." He broke a small sprig and held it up to the fading light. It was soft, fragile, incapable of harm. He smiled, but it was not a cruel smile. It was the kind of smile that grief wears when it realizes it has been mistaken for a joke. Back in Asgard, Baldr stood in the courtyard beneath the ash tree. His laughter carried by the wind that had once known his dream. Hodr stood beside him, listening to what he could not see. The gods threw their harmless weapons, and Baldr stood radiant and unscathed. Somewhere in the fields beyond, the mistletoe trembled. It had learned the sound of its own name. Silence grows differently in the hearts of gods. In some it becomes patience, in others envy, and in one it became curiosity sharpened into something that almost looked like mercy. Loki walked among the laughter like a ghost wearing a smile. He did not hate Baldr. How could anyone hate the one who made the sun seem kind? What he felt was stranger, a question that refused to be answered. If everything loves Baldr, what becomes of the world that does not? The games continued. Each throw was an act of faith. Each laugh, a hymn to the illusion of safety. Loki stood apart, watching the gods prove how little they understood the promises that bind them. He found Frigg one evening at the edge of the golden hall. Her hands were folded in her lap, her eyes distant, not with pride, but exhaustion. "Mother of light," he said softly, "you have made the world obedient." Frigg smiled without looking at him. "It is a mother's work to make the world gentle." "And everything swore?" "Everything. Even the small things?" His tone was casual, almost tender. She hesitated, the smallest crack in a perfect wall. "All but one. The mistletoe. It was too young to swear, too soft to be asked." Loki bowed slightly. "Then it was wise of you to spare it." He left before she could see the question bloom behind his eyes. That night, Loki returned to the quiet grove. The mistletoe shimmered faintly in moonlight, its leaves breathing silver. He knelt beside it, his shadow crossing the roots like spilled ink. "You are not dangerous," he whispered. "That is what makes you dangerous." The plant said nothing, but something in the air changed. A tremor, a recognition. Loki plucked it gently and held it as one might hold a secret. In Asgard, Baldr's laughter filled the air again. He stood unafraid, radiant, the living proof that the world could be kind. The gods threw their harmless weapons, each one striking him like a blessing. Hodr stood apart, smiling though his eyes could not see. He listened to the rhythm of joy, the sounds of safety, the music of invincibility. Loki approached him quietly. "Why do you not join them, brother?" Hodr laughed softly. "Because I cannot aim. It would not be sport to strike at what I cannot see." "Then let me guide your hand," Loki said, his voice soft as dusk. "You deserve the laughter too." He placed the small sprig of mistletoe into Hodr's palm. It was light as breath. "A harmless thing," he murmured. "A game's piece, nothing more." Hodr hesitated, trusting. "If you will guide me." "I will," said Loki, and for once it was true. Together they faced the courtyard. The gods were still laughing. The air shimmered with delight. Loki's fingers curled around Hodr's wrist, steadying it, raising the hand until it faced the light that had never known shadow. "There," Loki whispered. "Throw." The sound that followed was not thunder. It was quieter, like something wholly remembering how to die. The mistletoe flew, silent and swift. It struck Baldr in the heart, and the world forgot how to breathe. Light folded inward. The laughter stopped mid-motion, as if frozen by its own echo. For a heartbeat, the gods did not understand what had happened. Only that silence had arrived, and it had come to stay. Baldr fell slowly, the way dawn fades at the edge of night. His eyes found Hodr's for an instant, not in blame but in recognition. Then they closed. The mistletoe lay upon his chest like a signature written in green. Loki stepped back. The laughter had left him too. Above them the sky dimmed. Below, the roots of the world trembled. Even Hel, in her far realm, lifted her head and listened. Because silence, once born, never dies quietly. There are silences that comfort, and silences that accuse. The one that fell upon Asgard did both. The gods stood unmoving, staring at what they could not name. Baldr's body lay upon the stones, still radiant, as if light itself refused to leave him. His hair caught the last glow of the day, his skin shone faintly, and for a heartbeat the Aesir believed he was only resting. Then Frigg screamed. It was not a cry, it was the sound of a promise breaking. The air split, the ravens fled, even the mountains seemed to flinch. Odin fell to one knee beside his son. He touched the wound, a mark so small it could have been a whisper, and his hand trembled for the first time since the dawn of gods. The All-Father, who had traded his eye for wisdom, found no wisdom here, only the reflection of his own helplessness. Frigg knelt beside him, her hair undone, her voice torn into fragments. "Who?" she asked, but the question was smaller than the silence that followed. The gods did not speak. Even Loki's name refused to rise from their throats. Not yet. Thor's hammer slipped from his hand. Tyr turned away. Freya began to weep in a language older than speech. And the world, once so proud in its order, began to tilt. They built a pyre for Baldr on the edge of the sea. The ship Ringhorni, vast and golden, waited upon the waves. The gods carried his body, each step a confession of their own powerlessness. They laid him upon the deck and surrounded him with everything bright. Flowers that never wilted, torches that refused to burn low, jewels that shone with borrowed tears. Nanna, his wife, came quietly. She looked upon him once, only once, and her heart folded itself in two. She fell beside him without a sound. The gods said nothing. They simply made space for her upon the pyre. When the flames were lit, they rose without hunger, as if remembering whom they touched. The sea took the light, carrying it beyond the horizon where even dreams end. Odin placed Draupnir, his golden ring, upon Baldr's chest. "For what cannot be kept," he whispered, "and what must return." The wind shifted. The flames whispered a name that was not meant to be heard. Hel. Meanwhile, far below the roots of Yggdrasil, a shadow stirred in the half-world. Hel, daughter of Loki, lifted her gaze. Her eyes were two halves of eternity, one bright as day, one dark as endless night. "Something pure," she murmured, "has crossed the border." She felt Baldr's light entering her realm, and for the first time since she had been cast there, the air warmed. The dead looked toward the sound, remembering life. Hel smiled, not cruelly but with recognition. So even perfection finds its way here. Above, the gods mourned. Below, the underworld learned to glow. And Loki was gone. He had fled to the edges of the world, where the sun forgets to rise. His laughter was gone too, replaced by a sound the wind did not know how to carry. He did not run from guilt, he ran from understanding. Because what he had done was not only kill a god, it had killed the certainty that gods could never fall. For 9 nights no one spoke in Asgard. The halls that once rang with laughter now listened to the sound of their own emptiness. Odin walked the highest paths, whispering to ravens, asking for a way to undo what had been done. Frigg sat by the lake, her reflection beside Baldr's name in the water. Even the waves dared not move. The world still turned, but slower, as if reluctant. When grief has no words left, it sends a rider. For 9 nights, Asgard did not sing. The mead cups stayed untouched. The forges grew cold. Even Thor stopped the storms, for thunder would have sounded too much like shouting over tears. Frigg sat upon the steps of the hall and watched her own reflection flicker in the water pooled from her weeping. The lakes, the rivers, the very sky, all carried her sorrow. The world had become a mirror for her grief. At last Odin called forth Hermod, his swiftest son, the one whose courage was quiet enough to be mistaken for calm. "Go," said the All-Father. "Ride to Hel's realm and beg for what the world cannot live without. Tell her Baldr must return." Hermod bowed. His eyes did not shine like his brothers once had. They burned with duty, low and steady. He went to Sleipnir, Odin's 8-legged steed, and whispered the only prayer that can open every gate. "Let love be faster than death." He rode through the gates of Asgard, over Bifrost's dimmed rainbow, across plains that once hummed with life and now slept beneath morning skies. The road stretched like eternity learning to breathe. On the first night, he passed through the realm of shadows where the wind spoke every name ever lost. On the second, he crossed the black river Joel, whose bridge was watched by the maiden Modgud. She raised her pale torch. "Who crosses my bridge with living breath?" "Hermod, son of Odin," he answered. "I ride for the sake of light." Modgud studied him, his eyes, his steadiness, the tremor beneath it all. "Few come willingly to the land of stillness. Fewer still return." "Then I will be the fewest," he said and rode on. On the third night, he entered the Valley of Echoes, where every sound remembered who had spoken it. Baldr's laughter lived there still, faint, lingering, breaking upon the rocks like distant bells. Hermod slowed Sleipnir to a walk. He wanted to reach for the sound, to hold it, but memory has no body. By the 5th night, even the stars had given up their light. The world became suggestion, shapes without form, silence without rest. Only Sleipnir's hooves and Hermod's breath broke the dark. Finally, on the 9th night, a gate rose before him, vast, cold, carved from the bones of forgotten gods. It opened without being touched. Hel was waiting. She sat upon a throne of half-light. One side of her face was beauty itself, the other a shadow so deep it made the air tremble. Her eyes, one of day, one of endless night, regarded the living rider. "You are far from your father's hall, son of Odin," she said. Hermod dismounted and bowed low. "I come for Baldr." "Then you come for what belongs to all," Hel replied. She rose, her presence neither cruel nor kind, but true. "Your brother is here. He does not suffer. The dead envy his calm." "Then let the living envy it too," Hermod said. "Let him return, that light may rise again." Hel tilted her head. "Do you believe love outweighs the law?" "I believe love is the law." The hall grew quiet. Even the shadows leaned closer. Finally Hel spoke. "Then hear this. If every creature, living and dead, weeps for Baldr, I will let him go. But if even one refuses, he shall stay." Hermod bowed his head. Then the world will weep. Hel gestured toward a distant glow. He waits there, not in pain but in patience. Hermod walked forward, and there he saw him, Baldr, radiant even in death. His light was gentler now, steady and forgiving, as if death had taught him how to listen. They embraced not as gods but as brothers. "Tell them," Baldr whispered, "that I am not gone, only waiting where light rests between breaths." Hermod nodded. "We will bring you home." When Hermod rode back through the gates of Hel, the darkness did not follow. Behind him, the faintest shimmer of gold remained, proof that even in death, light leaves a trace. And for the first time since the silence began, the wind in Asgard began to move again. Frigg lifted her face. Somewhere, far away, she thought she heard a horse returning. When Hermod returned to Asgard, the sun was low, not setting, not rising, but standing still, as if it too were waiting. The gods gathered before the gates, their faces carved with hope that dared not speak its name. Frigg ran to meet him. "Tell me," she said, her voice trembling like a candle in wind. Hermod bowed his head. "He waits. Hel will release him, if every being weeps for his loss." Frigg's hands covered her mouth, and her tears fell like small stars to the earth. "Then the world shall drown in sorrow," she said. "No creature shall hold its tears." And so began the great weeping. Frigg walked the realms once more, this time not to command, but to beg. She went to men and gods, to beasts and stones, to fire and frost. Every heart broke willingly. The mountains echoed with lament. The rivers overflowed with mourning. Even the sky darkened, not in anger, but in empathy. The trees sighed, their leaves trembling as if in prayer. The sea rose and fell in rhythm with grief. And deep beneath the soil, the roots of Yggdrasil shivered, feeling the pulse of every tear that fell upon the world. Baldr's name became the shape of sorrow. It moved through every realm like a wind too heavy to carry itself. And yet, at the edge of a mountain cave, where light never lingered, a figure sat unmoved. Her name was Thok. Frigg knelt before her, weary and shining with salt tears. "Please," she whispered, "you alone have not wept. All life has bowed to love. Will you not join them?" Thok looked up. Her eyes were not cruel, only cold, as if they had long forgotten the meaning of warmth. She smiled faintly. "Thok will weep dry tears for Baldr's pyre. Alive or dead, the son of men brings me no joy. Let Hel keep what she has received." And in her voice, the gods heard something familiar. A flicker of laughter long silenced, a trickster's echo. Frigg rose slowly. Her heart did not break. It simply stopped asking. When Hermod brought the news to Odin, the All-Father did not curse, nor strike, nor rage. He only said, "Then the world must learn to love what it cannot keep." The gods built no more pyres. They held no more feasts. They spoke Baldr's name only in the quiet of dawn, when the world was half between dreaming and waking. Yet something changed. The wind that brushed the fields carried warmth again. Faint, but real. The light upon the lake at evening bent gently, as if greeting a friend unseen. And every time a child laughed without knowing why, Frigg lifted her face and smiled through her grief. For light does not die. It only learns to rest where eyes cannot reach. Far below, in the realm of hell, Baldr sat upon a stone that glowed faintly beneath his touch. He felt the tears of the living fall through the worlds like rain upon his soul. He closed his eyes and whispered, "It is enough." Hell watched him quietly. "You do not curse your fate." Baldr smiled. "How could I? The world still remembers me in its silence." Hell inclined her head. "Then remain, not as prisoner but as peace." And so the worlds turned once more. The gods no longer feared the dark, for they had learned that even shadow can keep light safe. The fires burned lower, but warmer. The air grew stiller, but kinder. Above all halls, beyond all songs, silence became sacred, not absence, but memory. And when the stars looked down upon Asgard, they saw not mourning but gentleness, the light that survives fire. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and remember. Every silence is a promise, and every ending is only light, learning to breathe again.